Okay, I want to talk about Spotify for a moment and just running a label in the 21st century. So I remember back when Spotify kind of started gaining traction, a lot of people said, things like it would be the death of the record label, or that running a successful label would no longer be profitable for most people. I think people would have said this back when iTunes and all these other digital stores started gaining traction as well. I could be wrong, but I feel like there's kind of a bias to think that these new technologies are bad. But do you think it's harder to run a label now in 2015 than it was, say, a decade ago?
Probably.
Okay.
Definitely if we were to say 15 or 20 years ago. Because what's happened is, don't get me wrong, I think that all these changes, right? I think the segue from LPs to cassettes to CDs to downloads to streaming, I think those are great and inevitable changes, right? I just think that the nature of the music industry is that because of physical records, the margins were so big that the music industry grew into a multi-billion-dollar business, which peaked around 1998. And what happened then is once iTunes was kickstarted, right? And then also the issue of piracy, of course, was becoming a very big thing. And now, especially with streaming, what's happened is because the distribution of content became more efficient, it also very much marginalized the amount of profit the music was able to create, right? Because physical records, there's a lot more profit to be made on the sale of a CD than there is on the download of an MP3. And the technological industry, right? Just technology in itself, and also internet and adoption of internet, that happened a lot quicker, that development, that adoption, that change, than the, at the time, very bureaucratic music industry was able to adopt to that and figure out changes in their business model to cope with all these changes. So what you see is, I just wrote an article about this, like since 1998, the total amount of revenue generated in the music industry has just dropped year after year after year after year. And with the current trajectory and with the rise in digital sales, it will take another few years until the total size of the music industry, right, yearly revenue, is going to go up in comparison to the year before again. Because still, like right now, digital downloads account for 52% of digital income.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, like downloading is going to fade, right, with further adoption of streaming.
Yeah.
But still, 2014 was the first year where the same amount, or like the same percentage of physical revenues were generated by digital revenues. 2014 was the first year. So before that, there was never ever a time when digital was as much income as physical, right? So now we need to get to a stage where the growth in digital can overcompensate of the total shrinkage in industry, economy.
Right, okay, that's fascinating. I mean, this kind of leads me to another question, and it's one I've had on my mind for a long time. And I mean, I don't really have the knowledge to generate an answer, but say 10 to 20 years down the track, how do you see labels being different? I mean, because I think they're going to be a lot different in terms of how they generate revenue. But how do you see them changing?
Very good question. And this is I have no definitive answer to this. This is something we struggle with daily, right? To figure out how to do this, especially because we as a record label have not yet attained the size where, even though we have small margins, that it's extremely profitable. So we're still very much figuring out, okay, how can we optimize cash flows? And I think one thing you're going to see is that the business models underlying digital distribution in all forms, whether that's sales on iTunes, streams on Spotify, Apple Music, or even music consumption on ad-supported platforms like YouTube or SoundCloud, I think those business models are going to be optimized in favor of the rights holders. Because the only thing that's holding that back right now is the lobby from the big established industries, such as the music industry itself, right? So major labels. For example, with the scandals about the deals with Spotify and SoundCloud, et cetera, et cetera. But also, for example, think about the radio and TV industry in the US, who has permanently been lobbying against the payout of neighboring rights for public performance of masters, which in the rest of the world is a very, very common thing that's adopted by pretty much every country. And I think as everything shifts in favor of the rights holders, right, and the content creators, and especially because the internet basically forces the trend that way, I think slowly the business models are going to adapt. So for a label like us and other independents, I think it will be very much about optimizing revenues and collection through these digital means. And then a lot of it will also be, okay, how can you figure out how to make money on merchandising and on sales of tickets and shows?